Hello and welcome to the May edition of Mytech U. Today we're going to be talking about what skills are needed to advance your technology above the line. I know that sounds like a mouthful, but I really wanted to focus on the right intent of this topic. And so welcome everyone. My name is Nathan Austin. This is a slight revision of a presentation that was given at our Tech Pulse event in April. One of the things that we look at is we say this is how we find hidden dollars in our technology. We've all invested a lot in the infrastructure and the systems we use, but oftentimes we're not necessarily using them as well as we could, and our staff is not using them as consistently as we would like. So the intent of this presentation is really to get into the vantage point that Mytech has. By being an IT service provider, we work with lots of different industries, hundreds of different organizations, and there's some consistent things that we see not only in our organization that we've learned from our peers and learned from educating ourselves, but what we've seen across our customers as far as what activities, what type of skills do they have that when we really see a customer taking advantage and improving their efficiency, improving the way they use technology versus those who have been kind of maybe stuck in doing it the same way. They may be investing, they may still be investing, but they're not necessarily advancing the way they're using their technology. So that's really the subject of the conversation today. Thank you for those who are joining us live, as well as who are watching the recorded version that will be available online. And so let's dig in. So first and foremost, we are going to talk about, I just want to frame the conversation with it, right? So where can I find the dollars? We're going to talk about that and make sure that we have the right frame of mind here. Then I'm going to give you a couple practical examples. Because I didn't want to divulge confidential client information, I'm actually going to use a couple examples within Mytech that we've done, but the same concept applies. And then we're going to say, how can you take the next steps? And for those who are attending today, part of the follow-up that you will receive is kind of a follow-up cheat sheet or a summary document as far as some bullet points that are the takeaways that I tried to put together in a summary for you so that you can have as just notes for after the conversation. Of course, we're always available for conversation. I'd love to brainstorm and chat with anyone about this if you're interested. So let's start with a familiar concept that I believe if you've been to our Tech Pulse events over the last few years, we've talked about this concept of above the line. Above the line really means that there are certain aspects of your technology infrastructure or technology systems and management and the way you use them as an organization that are really suited for an organization like an outsourced IT provider or whether you had an internal IT team, either one applies, that are really below the line, right? They're good at the infrastructure. They can make sure that the servers and the workstations and the switches and the boxes with blinky lights in the back closet that no one really likes to pay attention to and no one really likes to deal with because it's complicated, that's really what they're suited to do. And really the job of the IT team, whether it's the internal or an external resource, is to, when your staff come in the morning, turn on their machine, whether it's a tablet or a laptop or a desktop or all the above, and there's an application that they want to use, and they double-click on that icon that opens up that application, that when they do that, it works, right? I mean, that's really the basic function of IT, right, is to make sure, the below-the-line portion of IT anyway, is to make sure that when your staff want to use the applications that they need to use, that it works. So understanding that, that's not enough, right? That's where 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, when all you needed was an email address that wasn't AOL or Yahoo, and you were ahead of most of your competition. Well, that's not where the world is today. And so what we've seen advance, again, taking a step above the line, just to make sure that we're framing this up, is that there are certain aspects about, let's say you have a medical program, an EHR, EMR, EHR, depending on the acronym you choose to use, that has all your practice management in it, but maybe you're only using 30% of it, right? Well, the IT team that's below the line doesn't really care what percentage of that tool you're using. They just care that it works, right? But you as an operations or an owner, manager, operator, You care on how much you're using it and how effective that tool is for your team to be able to use. So the problem is taking that from a 30% utilization, that any given application, to 35% or 40% or 50%, is that you have to understand the operational impacts of that, and you have to understand that by turning this knob or turning this dial or enabling this feature, that it's not going to have any negative repercussions in other areas of the business. So there's some operational understanding, being able to integrate those programs or improve the way you're using those programs, inevitably to get you the data that you want to be able to manage your business from a data mining perspective. So that's basically, I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but really the point is this conversation is about above the line. It's about how can we improve the way we're using the systems that we've already invested in, how can we potentially integrate the systems that we've already invested in, and how can we make sure that we have consistent utilization of that across our teams so that when they're using these tools, it is producing the right data for us as leaders and managers and organizations to be able to operate and get the right information. Hopefully that makes sense. We've talked about this a lot, again, in our Tech Pulse events and sometimes in different sales interactions, but it's definitely not necessarily widely spread as far as an understanding of how the above the line concept. So I want to make sure I covered that. So let's, as I mentioned, there's a couple areas of focus that we're going to talk about today. Really, one is operations and one is process. From an operational perspective, it's about providing the right tools, making sure that the people you have the right tools to do their job effectively. And that could be a PC or a tablet, it could be the application, it could be a smartphone, it could be a handheld scanner if they're in the warehouse, providing the right tools. Improving the efficiency, so hopefully trying to drive out manual entry of information, right? So they're not duplicating their efforts. The movie Office Space famously made it, they don't have to fill out TPS reports. So help them, by doing what they do, they create efficiency. Operations also needs to provide visibility, right? So as a leadership and management team, I don't want to have to micromanage people. You don't want to have to micromanage people, but you want visibility into the productivity and the outputs that are coming from your team, whatever they are. So helping provide visibility to you as a team. As well as operations needs to provide training. So any organization, they're going to run into problems, and trying to make sure that people are using it, whether you're onboarding a new staff person or whether you're changing a process and training them on that new process, and making sure that they're operationally following the rules, so to speak. So there's definitely training involved there. Going over to the process side, again, high-level framing conversation, what we're going to be focusing on in the examples is process provides clear direction. I don't know about anyone here as far as understanding the retention rate, like when you have, even listening to a presentation like this, statistically, people only retain about 10% of the information they hear in any given presentation or any given conversation. So now I'm just going to, since we've covered 10% of this presentation and you're only going to retain 10% anyway, we'll just stop here. Okay, just kidding. However, you get the idea. So process and having it documented is really a way of saying, now you've done some communication and this is how we want to do stuff. Well, people might not do it every day, or they might forget, oh gosh, they don't remember every detail. So having documentation available to be able to provide clear direction to your team is really important. Again, then it enables consistent execution. They can reference it. They can hold them accountable to it, right? When we have that process clearly defined. Again, documented. So it's not just something that, yes, this is our process, and I can whiteboard this process, but have something that they can reference, whether it's a PDF or a website or a SharePoint portal or whatever it is, that they can actually find the documentation that gives them the clear direction. That also helps you, by the way, so that when they go through that documentation, they reference it, and they see something that is out of alignment. I'm trying to click the buttons that the process is telling me to click, but yet there's a gap here. I don't know the next step because the process isn't clear. Well, great. That gives you an opportunity to improve the process by them following it and seeing that there's a gap, and then giving them the ability to report that gap so you can make the process even that much more clear in the future. And then I believe that process also has a training component in your organization, is understanding, making sure that any different adaptations to process, modifications, improvements to process, there needs to be corresponding training associated with it. So those are the two primary areas of focus that we've seen that in organization, and again, specifically as it relates to IT, right? Not just about, if you're an auto dealership and, there's a process to change oil, right? Not just about that, but also about the systems that they use. It's really, and I'm going to focus definitely on the above-known components of IT maturity not just about any other given process, about how to just up some other process that's not necessarily using technology in your organization. All right, so moving on. Give you example number 1. So this is where one of Mytech's values is practice both confidence and humility, and this one in particular is going to focus on the humility part, hopefully. Mytech, one of the things we've done over the couple of years, we've identified that we really want to focus on working to improve and providing the best IT experience to our customers and to their staff. Now, I'm not saying that we're achieving and at the level that we want to be executing on. We definitely make mistakes, and we were running into some significant bottlenecks at the end of last year. So we're still working to improve on this aspect. But I'll tell you that here's some of the bullets that we got from feedback from our customers and from our team over the late last year that kind of was a catalyst for change. So first of all, like I said, our team was not being as effective as our customers needed. Like, yes, we were meeting our SLAs, our service level agreements, and response time, but it still wasn't good enough. So there's things we were missing. Requests were getting lost. We were finding that our dispatchers were actually getting the tickets that were coming in from our customers and assigning them to someone within minutes. But the problem was the person they were assigning them to had too many things on their plate. They were trying to manage 20 or 40 items, and one of those things, it was easy for one of them to get lost in the shuffle. So that was something that was happening. Engineers were also working hard, but they weren't necessarily escalating. So one of the things we found is that we've got some great people on our team that really want to work hard and really want to prove themselves and what they can do. But if they're a level 1 engineer that's working on a level 2 or a level 3 issue, they're going to spin their wheels. And so while I appreciate the fact that they wanted to demonstrate their efforts, they weren't thinking about, and we didn't realize this, but we found this out, they weren't realizing the impact that it was having on our customers, right? And the fact that it took too long to resolve certain issues. So this is one of the things that we found out. We didn't have a good escalation process in place. And the other thing that we found out in looking at all this information, it didn't seem like it was a staffing problem. A lot of times the answers to problems, and again, I hope that people on the line or listening on afterwards can appreciate that, people will always say they're busy. And sometimes the answer is, well, we just need to hire more people. Well, that's expensive. And so when we were looking at our numbers, because we actually have financial metrics that we benchmark ourselves against over time with other providers in the industry, it didn't look like it was a staffing problem. So that was kind of interesting to us. So hiring more people wasn't going to solve this problem. Maybe part of the equation long term, but in the short term, that didn't seem to be really the issue. So I wanted to kind of set up the example of here are the problems that we were experiencing, and here's some of the things we did to try and improve upon it. And my point is not to say that, hey, we had problems, and yes, we're working to fix them. It's really to say, well, how did we engage? How did we take things that we didn't have to necessarily invest more dollars by people, or we didn't have to buy new systems. It was we just needed to use our systems better. So I'll walk you through that here in this example. All right, so what did we do? So we got that feedback. We realized we got a lot of feedback from customers. We realized these problems. So we actually proactively set up conference calls and lunch meetings and conversations with a lot of different customers to really understand the impact of what they were experiencing from our help desk. That was key for us because our frustrated customers were more than willing to help us understand that and share their pain, which was great. So it was good to not only let them vent and explain to us what they're feeling, but it also helped us understand what are we doing that's causing this pain? What are we doing that we can do better to improve their experience? So we also then talk to our team leads. We have team leads on our help desk, and we try to say, what are the things that you're seeing on the team? What are the problems you're seeing as far as maybe workflow or how the team's working together, or what problems can we be improving upon? So we talk to them because they're the ones that see it on the street. They definitely understand what's going on. So once we did that, we identified 4 key improvement areas. We'll touch on those on the next slide, but we identified 4 of them. And then we basically said, here's the key point. We assigned a lead to execute on the 4 improvement areas and a timeline for implementation. So the problem is that we've seen, I want to elaborate on this point a little bit. The problem that we've seen in not only our organization as we've grown, as well as our customers' organizations, is that it's not The problem isn't that people aren't aware of that there's problems. The problem is often there's not someone who's assigned to lead it, or there's not someone in the organization that has the bandwidth, the available time, and or the expertise, but usually it's the time is part of the problem, to actually be able to effectively lead it. It ends up being one of those back burner issues that all the leaders and managers in an organization understand it. They get that there's a problem. It's always one of those things that with the fires that are burning today and tomorrow and later this week, it just never gets done, or it just gets done at such a slow pace that it doesn't really have a good impact. So we assigned the lead for executing on the 4 improvement areas. And so we ended up changing our team structure. We changed our service coordination process. And we layered in customer satisfaction surveys also to gather information about how we were doing to make sure that we're getting ongoing feedback. And not only did we create the satisfaction surveys that go out with every single ticket, and hopefully a simple way for our customers to provide us feedback, good, bad, or indifferent, but we also then made sure that there was a follow-up loop on that, right? Because if your customers are giving you feedback, I know we've failed at this in the past, is we've gotten feedback and then we didn't do anything about it, which is really bad because then people aren't going to give you feedback because you're not going to do anything with it. So we actually made sure that we implemented a feedback loop so that the high-level person in our organization is responsible for following up on those services. So those are the things we did. We elicited feedback, assigned a lead, put some timelines around it, and we ended up changing process, team structure, et cetera. And so what are some of the key wins that we took out of that? So using this as an example, we maintained the same staffing level, right? Because again, as I mentioned early on, we didn't feel, based on looking at the financial metrics, that it was a staffing problem. We looked at the utilization of our team. It didn't seem like it was a staffing problem. So we were able to maintain the same staffing level. By changing the service coordination process, we're able to effectively eliminate tickets that are getting lost in the shuffle, because we're now assigning responsibility not to the engineer, because their job is to do, not manage. Their job is to do. And so we assign the service coordinators to be responsible for managing, making sure that they, if a ticket sits there, that they're responsible for executing on it. Now, this is, I'll be clear too, this is the humble part. We made some of these changes and we have some good positive impacts, but we're still working on this, right? This isn't a done deal. I know we're still improving and getting our team used to the way this is operating. And within a couple of weeks, by implementing some of these changes, a couple changes, this is the service coordination and some of the escalation, we actually we reduced our outstanding ticket count by over 50%. So one number that we look at on a regular basis is number of open tickets on our help desk. And we were hovering for a long time around, somewhere over 200 to 250, 220 to 250, somewhere in that ballpark, open tickets on our help desk. And that's because, we get about 100 tickets coming in a day. So we close around 100 tickets a day, but, the collective total number of open tickets were, a little over 200. So we were able to get that down to below 100 at its lowest point, but actually it's hovering now between 100 and 150. So we were actually reduced the total number of count, which means that we're going to be able to respond faster to tickets, and respond faster to our customers, and actually, just have less of a workload as far as what's outstanding, so that we're resolving issues faster for our customers. So we're going to improve the overall response, and we actually then put that CSAT process in place, and we're currently operating on average of less than 1% of negative responses of any ticket. So we do around 500 tickets a week. So that's less than 5 tickets a week that have any negative response associated with them. So there's a couple other improvements we identified, but again, so to summarize this point, is that we didn't buy any new systems, we didn't hire any new people, we just looked at the problem, asked for some feedback, and we're able to identify, gosh, we can do some things better by just layering in the process. So we worked with the operations person who was the lead on this. We enabled process. We looked at the way our systems could support the way we're operating, and we were able to implement these key steps. So that's the key points that I want to take away from there. I want to double check that there's no questions, and there aren't, so that's good. Thank you for wanting to make sure if there's any questions that I can possibly answer those. So this example was the one that was really about not necessarily integrating a new system. It wasn't, about necessarily. I guess it wasn't necessarily even necessarily about improving a percentage of utilization of a system. It was actually just changing the way we were using an existing system, changing our processes around to make it more conducive to serving and meeting the needs of our customers from their feedback. So we actually didn't have to do a whole lot, but we didn't have to do a whole lot from an investment of dollars in systems or tools or anything like that. It was really about redefining on how we were using our systems based on the feedback we're getting from our team and our customers. So the next example actually digs in more along the lines of how do you integrate systems and improve the utilization of systems and provide better visibility. So I will move on to that next. All right. So some of you may know Mytech just recently, at the end of March, we acquired, the effective date was April 1st, we acquired an IT company in Denver. So that's part of why this example is here. But let me give you some examples of some of the things we learned by working with this organization in Denver. Is that on a couple areas, on their quoting software, for example, they were currently using Excel, which is fine. It's a fine tool. There's a lot of manual data entry as far as entering this information into their systems, and that was across sales and procurement and marketing and et cetera, service delivery. Part of the quoting was also it was inconsistent deliverable because of the Excel template. There wasn't a lot of standards put around it, so it wasn't giving the same experience to different customers. And then there was a manual handoff because the systems weren't integrated. Excel wasn't integrated. It created a lot of manual effort as far as handing it off from sales to project management to the field deployment services, things like that. And the other thing that was a problem is it didn't give great management visibility. It didn't give management visibility to understanding, well, what's going on? Are we low or high, or what impact does it have on service? So we can try and forecast staffing levels and have better understanding of what that looks like. So and that was all just around really their quoting software and how that was which was only using Excel. So again, we'll get into some of the components, but here's some of the key pain points that I pulled out specifically for this example. The next one was the professional service automation tool. Many organizations, like medical, it's the health records or medical records. In manufacturing, it's oftentimes an ERP package. Ours is called a professional service automation tool. So it's basically all those tools, except it just doesn't have the accounting component. So we actually integrate with an accounting tool separate from this. So when we looked at the tool, we probably estimated that it has a CRM component, a customer relationship management component, basically the sales side of the organization. They're probably only using that module about 30%, but they paid for 100% of it, right? So I'm guessing that anyone who's bought software in the past, if there's different modules that you're purchasing and you're only going to use 30% of it, I don't believe that the software company says, well, we're only going to charge you 30% of the sales price then, because you're only going to use 30%. You're paying for 100%, even no matter what the utilization that your team has. On the service delivery side, they were using it a bit more, which is good, but it still was only about 60%. And then there was also what we call it's a procurement module, which helps basically, it enables a more efficient procurement of hardware and software licenses for our customers on their behalf, and having all these things integrated so we can manage that effectively, because our customers expect us to be able to manage the equipment that they buy, the assets they have, so that we can help them budget and plan into the future. All right, so that's the example. Now let's look at some of the actions that we looked at. Okay, so on the quoting software side, Mytech in Minneapolis was using, we had a quoting tool that is integrated with our professional service automation. So not only were we going to layer in the tool that we have, but also integrate it into our system, make sure that we have, as I mentioned, they're low. The other thing that it does is that it's really nice that our quoting software actually integrates with our distribution software. So that if a customer says, hey, I need to buy a new PC or a laptop or something like that, through our distribution software, we can actually do a search in our quoting tool and actually find what the features of the PC, the capabilities, as well as whether or not it's in inventory in stock, so we can get it quickly and meet the customer's timeline requirements. So this is something that they were doing very manually across different systems and different distributors, where our quoting tool actually pulls that all together in one easy interface. So, so those are some things in our quoting software. Right? Just implementing quoting, the quoting software, integrate it with our distribution databases, which is part of the quoting tool, and we're going to integrate it with our professional service automation tool and give feedback into the CRM component of the tool. All right, so now let's look at the PSA side. Again, as we mentioned, we're going to integrate with the quoting software, so that integrates with the CRM. The service delivery, one of the things we mentioned is that it was a manual handoff. So part of integrating quoting allows us to take all that information from the proposal, and we're able to give it over to the service delivery team, so they actually have a full project scope, and all that information is automatically ported over, and there's no manual duplication of effort in moving that over. That also makes sure that we don't lose information. Right? That's one of the key things that happens in manual duplication of data entry, is that you might lose the actual information, or someone might forget to copy something, or it accidentally gets deleted, or whatever. So we wanted to make sure that we could bring that over effectively. Finally, enabling the procurement module, which will integrate so that we can actually properly invoice, and it makes it easier there so that we're not duplicating the effort there and maybe like putting in the wrong manufacturer part number, which might then give us the wrong asset, which means we might invoice the wrong amount. So it allows us to make sure that we're invoicing correctly, and that when our purchasing person actually goes to our distribution, it's automatically put together for them. So again, eliminating a lot of the data entry. So, excuse me, these are some of the actions that we took relative just to the quoting and the PSA side. So the key wins that we took out of this were more efficient and consistent quoting for sales, as you would expect. The manual entry of products and services basically has gone away. And it also has given visibility to the leadership, understanding, well, what activities is the sales team going through, and helping us forecast, hiring for staff into the future, and being able to plan better. On the PSA side, and I'll get to how we did these key wins as soon as I get to these bullets. On the PSA side, being able to do a better job of tracking visibility for sales management, as I mentioned, but it's using the tool more effectively. No more manual entry from Excel from the service delivery perspective, and we're bringing over the consistency of the expectation from the sales team, from quotes. And again, no manual entry on the procurement side. So there's a lot of manual entry. There was a lack of visibility, lack of consistency, a lot of room for error, just in a couple areas of the business based on how they were operating. So we were able to bring those together, and basically by not buying any new systems, we had to buy some more licenses, but we didn't have to buy new systems. We just had to take them from using Excel, a different tool. Excuse me. I'm going to cough here. Sorry for that. So the key thing to get these key wins, though, let's talk about that, because these are some obvious things that probably any leader, any manager, and across any of our customers would be able to see. This is obvious stuff, right? How can we do this better? But the key thing is, who was assigned to lead these, and what were part of the execution components? And so we basically layered in an operations person and a process person who understood our systems. Excuse me. Who understood our systems. And so by understanding our systems, they're able to say, well, where are the gaps? And they will have conversations with all the different individual stakeholders. They will understand how our systems work, how our processes work, how if we did something this way in the quoting tool, it was going to have a negative impact on our ability to invoice it, or a negative impact on our ability to get it to our procurement person correctly, or a negative impact on our ability to provide the management visibility and leadership visibility that we needed. So understanding not only operationally how these different tool sets are going to impact things, understanding how our systems operate, and understanding the nuances of the systems, and being able to collaborate with people internally on that. And then being able to layer in, okay, here are the interim processes that we need to go through. Here are the long-term processes that we need to identify as far as taking steps towards our end goal. But the key is that we had to identify a lead. As I mentioned earlier, our process person is taking the lead on all of this. right? So this doesn't mean that the managers aren't involved, the leaders on the sales side, the leaders, the GM, the service management, the system administrator. Doesn't mean that any of those people aren't involved. It just means that the lead person is responsible for tying it all together and really driving it forward. So that was one of the key things that we've learned in our organization and what we've seen across other organizations with our customers. And even in a simpler, if we just say, maybe it's not a process need, but let's take it to like a medical organization that we've worked with recently. Actually, they've been a customer for a long time. And our relationship completely changed with them when they hired someone to actually be the application specialist. This application specialist wasn't to do the below-the-line stuff. It was to look at how is our team using this software and how can we improve the way we use the software? How can we make sure that we're integrating with our providers, that we're providing the right information? Because that's something, excuse me, that typically your internal IT isn't going to have the expertise because they're not focused at the application layer. They're not focused at the operations component. They just want to make sure that it works, right? So allocating and dedicating resources to these components are some of the key things that we've learned over the years. All right, so what can I do next? So now I want to take it and say, all right, these are obvious things. Talk about putting a lead to it, sharing some experience across different customers we've worked with, as well as the things that we've done internally and we've learned internally from our peers, and feel blessed and fortunate that we've got great team members that are able to take lead and execute on this stuff. So the two role gaps that we really see in organizations is I would call operations. And when I say operations, I don't mean necessarily like GM level operations, right? Sometimes the GM is responsible for overall operations or a president or something like that, but someone who actually digs in at the tactical level, like what's being done on a day-to-day basis operation and making sure that that's aligned there. And some people call that a business analyst. That's something there, or an application specialist, like I mentioned, just someone that really digs into your EHR program or your ERP program, something like that. And then process and corresponding to process and documentation. It might be difficult to find all of that in one person, right? But hopefully you can start making progress in that direction by maybe allocating, and again, identifying a person who might be able to do some of those things, not necessarily all those things, but some of those things. We have two people in our organization that are really the specialists that do those things. One of them on the operations side, and then one on the process and documentation side. Excuse me. So first and foremost, when you look at when you're trying to identify a person, there's a key concept. We use a methodology in our organization called EOS. It's the Entrepreneurial Operating System. If you were at Tech Pulse last year, in 2014, Gino Wickman was the keynote speaker, and his book Traction actually talks about EOS. And one of the concepts in EOS is get it, do you get it, do you want it, and can you do it? So when you look at a person and look at the role that you want them to fill, do they get it? Do they understand it? Does that make, can they really understand like where you're trying to drive the organization, right? That's going to speak to their autonomy and how much you're going to have to interact with them to just like point them in the right direction. The next one is, do they want it? Is that a role that they want? Right? Maybe it's not a position that they're like, they might get it, but that would drive me crazy. I would hate doing something like that. Or I would absolutely love doing something like that. I'm extremely passionate about doing something like that. That's what you want from a standpoint of wanting, right? And if anyone has ever met Michael Fresconi, our process director, he wants process direction. He is one of the most passionate people I've ever met, probably the most passionate person I've ever met about process. So he definitely wants it. And then can they do it? Do they have the capacity to do it? Is it something that they're capable of doing? Do they have the aptitude to do it? Those kind of things. That's kind of the get it, want it, can do it. That's very, very important. And Mytech, I can tell you, has failed several times over the years, many times over the years, of putting people in positions that it really wasn't aligned with those three things. And we basically set them up for failure, which we've learned. I'm sure we're still learning, but it's something that is we've learned as a key component if you're looking to put a person in this position. The other thing that I would say is that, again, as we touched on earlier, is part of the problem is that we oftentimes don't allocate people No people know how to do it. It's not a matter of whether or not they understand it. And most leaders and managers and organizations understand this stuff and can identify these things, but they don't necessarily have the bandwidth to do it. So what I would suggest, and what I've seen, and what I would recommend, is that if you're going to do this, you need to allocate at least 50% of their time to being able to do these kind of tasks. That's going to be key. And then finally on this is really collaborate on the desired outcomes. You know, one of the things we've learned is that when we collaborate, we get a better result. So these things can't be done in a vacuum. They need to be done across departments, across leadership, at the tactical level. There needs to be a lot of collaboration to make sure that you're able to understand and move things forward. All right, so some of the tidbits of things that I say, where can you seek out, where can you find these hidden dollars, and what are the things that these skill sets should be focusing on? If you think about your organization, is seek out operational challenges. Just talk to your staff. You're going to find things where there's gaps and problems that they have in execution. Again, elicit feedback from different folks, customers included. How is it impacting them? Understanding that. And then possibly even vendors, right, in addition to your staff. And then where are there areas, and I like to put it this way, where are there areas where there's a lot of copying and pasting going on in your organization? That's probably an area where you have an opportunity for improvement, where you can create some integration or create some different process or workflow that can definitely give you significant return on investment on this topic. Then I would say one of the other key things that are low-hanging fruit is use the tools that you have better, right? Whatever the current percentage utilization is, especially if it's lower than 50%, if you were to just ask yourself, what of the capabilities the system has, how much of that are we using? Once you start getting up into maybe the 80, 85, 90% utilization, getting to 91% is typically a lot harder task. But being able to go from 50 to 51%, or from 50 to 55%, or 55 to 60% is usually a bit easier, and you've got a lot of low-hanging fruit and easy wins inside your organization that can actually result in a lot of benefit to you. Again, you've already spent the money, so it's how do you find ways to improve that? Then possibly looking at integration. How can you just, you've got a couple tools, maybe there's a way for them to talk together. Again, that's eliminating the copying and pasting. There's a way to do that. That can save boatloads of your staff's time. So they can be focusing on other tasks that are more high value to your organization. And then defining the existing processes is really key. If you don't have those documented, not just defined, but documented, and have them in a place that can be referenced. And then I think the other thing that's really key here is that having a way so that you can elicit feedback from your team, so you can basically tap into the collective knowledge and experience of your entire team to gradually and incrementally improve these processes and improve the documentation you have for your systems. That's going to be huge. So those are really the key takeaways. Hopefully that allows you to kind of work above the line. Again, I really wanted to, the reason why this presentation was put together was because in nearly every customer meeting that I've been a part of in the last 6 months in particular, these were the questions that we had a lot of the leaders and managers asking. I know that I need to do this. I know I want to do this, but I don't understand the kind of roles, the kind of things that they should be focusing on. I don't understand the people that we should maybe be doing, or how should we be doing this. And so that was the catalyst for putting this information together, is really saying, here's what we see across our customer base. Here's what we've seen inside of our organization. Here's what we've seen across our peers, where they've been able to really focus their time not only at the making sure that they have a solid infrastructure and foundation. That's key, because if you don't have that, then all the stuff above the line doesn't even work. So having a good solid foundation, and then how do we really, you've already spent all the money below the line. You've invested in that hardware, you've invested in that software, you've invested in all those capabilities, but now how do we make it work for ourselves? How do we advance the way we're using tools above the line? Because I tell you, again, there's that arrow on the side, on the left-hand side here, which is, the return on investment. The more time you as owners and operators can spend above the line focusing on improving those components, the greater return on investment you're going to get on your systems. The better customer service you're going to deliver to your customers. The better margins you're going to deliver, to your organization. And really, that's going to, and the better visibility you're going to have to be able to run your operation as well. So that's really the above the line, what skills are needed to advance your organization above the line. It's really definitely a technology focus. So I wasn't focusing on extraneous processes outside of technology, but those are the skill sets that we've seen, again, across multiple organizations relative to helping them advance. So I don't see any questions at the moment. So I will, unless anyone has one right now, they can note in the question pane that I can answer. I'll pause momentarily, but I'll say that I will be following up with all the attendees and giving you that follow-up document that I mentioned. It's kind of a summary cheat sheet of takeaways. We look forward to having any engagement. If you have any questions afterwards, please email me, contact me. I'd be happy to have further conversation. So seeing no questions, thank you all very much for attending, and I hope you have a fantastic day.